So I feel it's important for us as we're creating safe and vulnerable space to name up front before moving into this sermon that there's some hard things to hear in here. There's some things that might bring up things from your own history or might trigger things within your body. I encourage you to take care of yourself in that. I encourage you to pay attention to that and to do self-care before, after you hear these words. I also encourage you not to try to fix the people around you. If they need something, they'll find it. On the spot, I want to invite Toby up to pray with me before I speak. Will you come say that prayer, Tobes? You're going to have to get real close and speak in my mic.
Pray for you. May all the strength that comes from your mothers and your mother's mothers be filled within you as you speak these words, and let your words and their words heal you. In Jesus' name we
pray. Amen. So we're on a path during this season of Lent, a fourfold path of forgiveness. We've approached this path holding it side by side with the metaphor that forgiveness is a labyrinth. It is linear, but on that path you wind in what feels like circles. You move forward and away and towards and away from that point that you ultimately want to reach. It's not a maze where you think that you're heading one direction and then hit a wall and have to go back to a different point and start again. Though you wind a path forward and back, every step brings you closer to the center, to the goal, to healing. To help illustrate this movement towards healing and the steps required to get there, we're holding scripture from 2 Samuel, from the story of David and Bathsheba. We're examining the forgiveness of David, who, as today's scripture tells us, despised that which the Lord gave him, and the path that God took that led to his forgiveness. Now, I've got all kinds of issues with this text that we're holding this season, the biggest of which is a lack of voice given to Bathsheba. We are focusing our healing journey on David and God, but what I want to know is, does Bathsheba ever find healing? After being raped, her husband killed, her child dying, does she find forgiveness with David, forgiveness with God, forgiveness with herself? Last week we examined what Reverend Umfo and Archbishop Desmond Tutu described as the first step, telling our story. We heard the prophet Nathan tell a parable to David about a rich man and a poor man, one who had many sheep and one who had a lonely ewe. It was a story about having much and still coveting and stealing more. It was a parable that Nathan saw as a parallel to David's relationship with Bathsheba. As a woman, being likened to a helpless sheep feels embarrassing. A parable where I am described as a belonging or property to a man that feels offensive. And a tale where I am coveted and stolen and slaughtered and feasted upon that feels abusive. This parable is abusive to women. Look around this room. Literally, look around. I want you to look at the face of a woman in this space. Do you see a helpless sheep? Shift your glance and find another woman. Do you see someone's belonging? Now find a third. Is she something that you have any right to? Another. Something you have a right to steal? Now look at me. Look me in the eyes. Do you have any right to me? At least one of those 5 women you just looked at has experienced rape. 2 of them, statistics would tell us, has had some sort of sexual violence in their life. But those are just statistics, right? I looked around this room and counted the women that I saw this morning during our first song. There were 17 of us. And of those 17, some of them I know well, some of them I've never even spoken to. Of those 17, at least 8 of them have told me their tales of sexual violence. 8 survivors in this room, and that's just the people who've shared with me. Take a breath and let that really sink in. Feel it in your skin, however uncomfortable it is. Hold it on your breath. Whatever that brings up for you, taste that in your mouth. Now close your eyes and see the faces of the women in your life. Your mothers, sisters, your co-workers and partners, your daughters. This parable is not what's abusive to women. How many of their stories have you heard? This story is not what's abusive to women. How many of their voices do you hear in the holy text we heard today? But I tell you, this damn story is not what's abusive to women. Silence is. The first step to forgiveness is ending that silence by telling your story. And the first step to resentment is pretending that your story doesn't affect you. Pretending that you can swallow that hurt and numb that pain. Because acknowledging the pain is critical in moving towards healing. There's no way around it. Trust me, I've tried. I disconnect from my pain. I imagine packing it neatly into a box and putting it up high on a shelf in my basement. I shut the door and walk away because I have so many other things I need to get done. I need to feed my children, or I need to get through the workday and seem like a powerful woman in my position. I need to share an article on Facebook. Anything feels more important than opening that box. But I tell you, that has not served me well. It may have served me well at one time, that may have helped me get through the trauma in the moment, but if I don't unpack that box, then I'm not really through anything. The feelings I push away and refuse to accept, they fester, they don't disappear. And that thing that I think I'm over, it starts to affect everything I do. I must acknowledge the pain to be able to accept the truth of what currently is. I must grieve so I can arrive at acceptance. The Tutus say that when we experience any kind of loss or suffering that causes pain, that grief is present. They say grief does not only occur when someone dies, grief happens whenever we lose something that is precious to us. Even our trust, or our faith, or our innocence. Grief is how we come to terms not only with the hardship that we've endured, but also with what could have been if life had taken a different course. We grieve as much for what might have been as for what was. Most of us have heard of the stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and ultimately acceptance. Until we get to acceptance, we are not able to get to forgiveness. Until we can acknowledge the pain of what we've lost, accept that life is different, we are not able to heal. God is grieving in our scripture today. God has moved out of the stage of denial, which serves to help pace and ease us into the truth of grief. Did you hear God's anger? God's bargaining and depression? I anointed you king over Israel. I rescued you from the hand of Saul. I gave you your master's house and your master's wives, and I gave you the house of Israel and of Judah. And if that had been too little, David, if that had been too little, I would have added so much more. Why have you despised me? Why have you despised the word of the Lord to do what is evil? God says that what happened is evil. God is not saying this happened for a reason. God is not giving excuses to David's actions. God is not taking any ownership over what has occurred, but instead saying that I was here all along. I held faith that you would honor me, honor our relationship, and instead you abandoned me. I feel used and I feel disposed. I feel like all I did was in vain. I am hurt. Your actions, David, have hurt me. Just hearing those words, I wonder if Bathsheba didn't feel the same. Feel the same towards David and towards God, disposable, forgotten, hurt. But those feel like understatements. You use me and infuse me with your own need to feel worthy, but the story told about me doesn't even lend to hear me. You hold me, more like bound me, if not ropes, then fear surrounds me with your guards and with your power while you lock me in this tower of illusion and mistrust. God, the way you move disgusts every inch that's always been me, till that moment when you pinned me. How you saw me and you took me, and with entitlement you fucked me. What's the story all about? You don't even hear my shout. It's so silenced by your good deeds, but your good deeds, they don't serve me. Where is God while I am bleeding, while my skin tears and I'm needing? Where is God in all this bleeding? Where are you, God, when I am needing? I hate that our Bible does not give voice to women in the way it should. I hate that our stories aren't told and our hurt isn't acknowledged. I hate that even our current society doesn't hear our stories or acknowledge our pain, that the word rape is choked on with fear it may ruin someone's life as if it hasn't already. Sometimes to survive the day, to survive the hour, sometimes just to survive the next breath, I have to live in denial. Often I live in anger and resentment. I bargain with my time and my attention and my body. I mind-numbingly move from task to task, but what I don't do is feel. What I don't do is let my body accept that this world is not what I want it to be. That I live in a country run by a misogynistic, racist president. That every 98 seconds, a woman is sexually assaulted. And that I contribute to social and institutional systems of oppression. Every day I do that. And my silence does that. Forgiveness, healing, Lent, they are all about acceptance. Not accepting what was and what is, and that it happens for a reason. I don't buy that. But accepting that even God doesn't escape from suffering. That's what we're reminded of throughout this whole Lenten series. Nails pounded through flesh and blood, weight hanging from metal and wood. God was not just alive with Jesus, God was dying in Jesus. God was not just there with Bathsheba, God was raped within Bathsheba. God was not just present with us, God is within us, living in us, moving us, speaking through us. That's why this work is so important. Finding forgiveness with God is all about finding forgiveness with pieces of yourself, with pieces of others. Telling your story is telling God's story. Acknowledging your pain is acknowledging God's pain. Your healing is God's healing. It's my healing. It's our healing. Telling our stories, acknowledging our feelings, that's the only way to get to acceptance. And that's the only way to get to healing. And if we stop short of acceptance, we are freezing ourselves in these lives of denial, in these lives of anger and resentment, of constant bargaining, these lives of depression. Last week, we spent time pondering what stories we hold that need healing. We brought them to this altar. This week, our work is to hold the question of what hurt do you have that needs to be acknowledged. Start by acknowledging it yourself. When you're ready, I invite you to come forward and be anointed. To be reminded that God is within each of you. Even where there is no good, there is God. Your suffering is God's suffering. God's peace is your peace. Come forward as you're able.